Hello there guys, it's Joey and I've decided I'm going to make a video and talk about the Be the Witchy change feel vibration that's going on right now. I've actually decided to make a video as a result of Christina making one because that was amazing, and if you haven't seen hers, go check hers out. Hers was really, really good. So initially I was kind of hesitant to get involved with I guess you could call it a sort of more positive chain of events, chain of energetic motion, if you like, with regards to this, because I had no idea what inspired it. There was some difficulty and drama going on, and I have no idea what any of that was about. So I was kind of like, well, you know, let people who were involved speak their piece and talk about it. But I was watching Christina and I was thinking about some things that have been bothering me and things that I've been seeing in sort of generalized terms, and I decided what I would do is offer a different perspective, my perspective obviously, about what Be the Witchy change means to me. And I think that's more of a lifestyle than a movement, and that's another reason I was hesitant to get on board at first, because I think living the change you want to see in the world is a sort of a key point. And I've talked about this in about being real in multiple occasions. I've made videos about it, I've made blog posts about it, I've made essays that have been printed out on Witch about it, and I try and talk about this regularly, and I think it's kind of, it ebbs and flows, because it's not the first time and it won't be the last time that we have seen the issue of real witches, your witchery versus my witchery, and then division, which is what I really want to talk about in terms of our community and then the community at large, society at large. And I've made notes to me. I'm going to try and prop them up there. Oh, there we go. Right, and I want to talk about some different ideas that I haven't seen brought up yet. And the first thing that I really want to talk about is that I don't believe in the dividing of the newbie witches and the old witches, because I think we're all new and we're all old at any given point on our path. I think the minute that we think we know it all is the minute we should give up and stop doing what we're doing, because we've lost something. We've lost a part of our spirituality. Spirituality and witchcraft and the pagan path for me is evolutionary, and it's something that I keep touching on, I keep talking about, I keep getting a load of ridicule for, is the idea that I think that witchcraft and different elements of witchcraft and spirituality evolve. I don't think that they should be stagnant. I don't think there is one message, one way of telling things that is more important than others. I think you can find wisdom wherever you look. I don't believe in saying there is one religious path. I like Flora's analogy of there are many roads up the mountain. That has stayed with me. I think there are many, many truths in many, many variants of path. And I think what truth is to one individual is so highly personal that we can't then go and apply what we think we know en masse. And I've said that I think the reason that this keeps happening, particularly in pagan circles, is a kind of a side effect of the highly personal nature of what spirituality is, and what paganism is and what witchcraft is because there isn't hard and fast rules like there are in other more dogmatic religions, whereby there is a set of rules and people follow those to the letter, which is basically their interpretation of that letter, but that's something else. So in paganism, there isn't this hard and fast rule, and the problems, a lot of the problems start, for me in particular, when people start trying to apply rules to other individuals, and it becomes like value judgment. Now, unfortunately, the one that gets applied most is kind of like the Wiccan Laura 3, and I think that it gets misinterpreted, and I think it gets put into situations which it doesn't apply to, and then people are trying to apply it to people who don't necessarily follow Wicca. I don't have a problem with Wicca myself. I have a problem with anyone trying to fit everyone into the same box and say that their experiencing of life is the right way, and not allowing other people to express themselves through different life experience, different spiritual experience, different witchcraft experience, different pagan experience, whatever. And this came about recently when the idea of the Wiccan Laura 3 was used to say that witchcraft shouldn't be involved in politics whatsoever. And this is another reason why I've kind of avoided videos for a week, and I've been kind of hesitant to make videos for a little while, is because of the over alarming sensitivity of issues right now within the political system. Some of it, I think, is a huge churning point for positive change which needs to occur. So people are upset and outraged and hurt and seeing issues that need to be addressed and are standing up for that, and that's a good thing. There's kind of like been an activation of moral ethics within themselves, that people are seeing like the world is being destroyed and are marching and are speaking out about it and things such as that. But unfortunately, there's been kind of like this culture of trying to silence people, and I've been kind of dismayed to see a lot of it in the pagan society, in pagan circles. Sorry, I mean, of course, it's going to exist everywhere, because the easiest and fastest way to get your own way is to manage to silence anyone who has a differing view or a difference, who opposes what you believe. And so when I've seen things being said such as, you know, you shouldn't be involving witchcraft in politics whatsoever, it's against the Law of Three, and I'm like, okay. In that circumstance, there is material that can be read that was cited by Gardner, that is it Valentine? The witches of his era went and cast magic against the Nazis. They went to the coasts of England and performed magic of a political nature to stop the Nazis invading, and there is talk that it cost them a whole lot, that they didn't survive it, and so on and so forth, but they did it, and they're involved, very, very involved in Wicca. So that kind of like, the minute you know a little bit of Wiccan history, that kind of doesn't make huge amounts of sense to me. Like, these are perhaps what you would call the founding members of modern Wicca, and they saw the need to cast spells on terms of a political nature. Now, the reason that I am talking a little bit about sort of like this is because it creates this division that has been occurring, that kind of trickles down into what I feel like Be the Witchy change is becoming, because people are feeling like they are being attacked. They're being told that they can't practice a certain way. And I think the problem is the world right now is so us versus them mentality that it's driving me to distraction. And I can list them. Like, all I see on a daily basis, to the point where I've not made videos, is the idea of Republican versus liberal. And that's obviously the American political landscape right now is in a state of volatility. As is England, unfortunately, because of Brexit. So that becomes, I don't know, us versus us. Nothing. Forget me. I'm not in with that lot. That kind of mentality. I want nothing to do with that kind of. I think it's disgusting. The whole let's kick people out of our country because it's just disgusting. I don't like it. Go Lords this morning, but you know, trying to protect the rights of EU citizens that already live here. Just anyway, I'm not getting into politics, or I will rant. And it becomes an us versus them mentality, is what I'm saying. And then there's been like this influx of blaming millennials for the state of things right now. So it becomes baby boomers versus millennials, which I think is odd. As apparently I'm a millennial within like social definitions from sociology perspective, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I was one. And then I see people like blaming millennials and saying millennials are all stupid and all millennials do is take selfies, and I'm like, okay. And then we have kind of like the unfortunate situation with the whole creation of a binding spell to bind Trump, and it's it puts me in a very awkward situation because I understand the need for protest and the need to speak out and the need to do something in a situation which is overwhelmingly frightening and upsetting, and you don't want people being targeted by hate. On the other side of it, I felt like, just to express a quick opinion about it, I felt like the spell was started off as, it sounded like a joke spell, it doesn't sound realistic. It then sort of escalated, and so they made it real. And the portrayal of it in the media was very derogatory against witches. It's the last resort of the desperate is how it got portrayed in a lot of media. And then, of course, it then invites we're at spiritual war from Christians that are like down the let's not consider anybody else's point of view path. So there's that us versus them mentality. And then there's divides within the pagan community, people calling each other stupid, people being disrespectful, people like not allowing someone an opinion. And I wrote about it in my blog post for Witch, Are You Real Witch? I was like, it feels like the art of debate is dying a death when people cannot sit and listen and discuss and debate and consider other people's perspectives. There's a lot of political like videos right now with people just flat on interrupting when they've asked a question, and like the scientist or whomever is attempting to answer the question from their perspective with scientific evidence usually, and they're just interrupting them, and it's like, oh, is this what is up in the air right now? And it's not good. It's so divisional. And I'm like slapping my head against the desk last week because again with the They're Not Real Witches has come out. And it's happened again this morning that if you use crystals, you're not a real witch. Like, you're new agey, and if you're not using bones and blood, then you're using crystals instead, then you're a lesser witch. And I'm like, because there's a hard and fast law that if you use crystals, you can't be into bone work. Apparently, like, you can't embrace both. Oh, and another thing, there's this mentality that's just going around about the Oscars. It's like the Oscars versus honouring the military. I'm like, why are these two things anything to do with one another at all? Why? Like the us versus them mentality that seems to be seeping into things to get people to argue with and ignore what is actually going on is paramount right now. It's crazy. It's like scary. It's like it's an ego trip on an ego trip on an ego trip, and it's like So going back to my thought about this, so it came up again today with, if you should be using bones and blood, that's what a real witch is, versus people using crystals. And I was like, so this is how I feel about that situation. I feel that there are honouring spirits, which is a huge part of what witchcraft is about, within all of these elements. So you work with the spirits to do with bone work. So for example, you may have a animal skull on your altar, which is to do with honouring the spirit of a crow, and therefore it's a crow skull, and it's an actual bone, and that becomes a fetish. So there is a tying of the animal spirit to it. It's to do with your spirituality, path working, shape-shifting in some respects, and it's to do with creating a sort of a sacred home, if you like, for that spirit, which it tethers to but is not chained to, and then that's one example of using animal bone work. So then if you're using and interacting with the plant devas, that would be the spirit of a plant, depending on your interpretation of whether you believe it has to be a living plant or if you can still work with the energies of that deva even when it is harvested. There is some debate, again, it's just personal lens and seeing things through whether or not that is physically possible, but regardless, you're working with the spirit of a plant, flower, tree. So why can't you not work with the spirit energy of a crystal? And if you go do a little bit of homework, there's a whole host of history with people using crystals in magic, going back to ancient Sumeria. It's not a new age thing. So, yeah. I was talking, well, I was kind of, I wasn't really talking, I was kind of responding to a Facebook thing yesterday about the nature of history as well. And this was to do with kind of like the suppression of women. And I was actually discussing how I didn't agree with a particular article. And I think this is the way that I would present an argument for this. I was like, okay, so there's been an article recently which is about what the voice of Lilith would be saying with regards to the suppression of women by the current political system. And one of the first things that was suggested is that Lilith would suggest forgiveness. And that didn't resonate with how I felt about the dark goddess Lilith, because in the mythology she refused to be subjugated by a man, by Adam, and that is in the Christian mythos from the Old Testament. Now there is of course this whole belief system that she is a far older goddess and she gets sort of watered down into a human story, but that's by the by. But anyway, she refuses to be subjugated. She'd rather leave and be cast out and be hated and be ostracized and be reviled than submit, than be raped, basically, because she did not want to subjugate. And that's a strong word, but ultimately, if you are lying down and and it's not even allowing, it's submitting to something that you don't want to do, that's still a form of attack. So, to my mind, Lilith refused to be subjugated. And that's, to my mind, what she would encourage in others. Forgiveness may come down the road at some point when you're doing that work within yourself, and I'm not going to propagate you must never forgive as a analysis of one's emotions, because one's emotional path working is one's own journey. But in that moment, one of the first things that she would propagate, I don't think it would be that. And then that's how you disagree with a point without saying, my God, this is stupid, my God, It's like, well, from how I interpret myth and from this, and this is how I feel about it. And I don't agree with the notion that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is debate. It's not standing around calling people names. It's not saying this person is, trying to be derogatory towards their humanity, their experiences, their intelligence, or any of that. Trying to degrade them as a person is not debate. It's debate versus silencing, and I think that's a lot of what comes forward with the Be the Witchy change and things worth considering. But what I really want to make a point about here is that I think with the cycles of this, it doesn't happen to just newbies. And this is why I was hesitant to make one of the reasons I was hesitant to make the video, because I don't think it's a newbie versus old bee thing. And I think making it a newbie versus old bee thing is again being divisional. I don't think that's a fair analysis of what happens. I think, unfortunately, no matter whom we are, we at some point encounter people who either completely disagree with whom we are or dislike us for reasons unknown, or they just are on an ego trip or whatever, and rather than debate and discuss and you know, have a dialogue about things, they go for the hate card. They go for the derogatory card. They go for the deriding card. They go for, well, your opinion isn't worth shit card. And I've experienced this plenty. I've been on YouTube, I think it's 4 or 5 years. So I'm not newbie at this. And yet I still get all this, unfortunately, from time to time, more than I would like. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, and you have to get to a point where you realize that a lot of the time it's not necessarily about you, and quite often there are motivations which you don't see at first. And I'm going to make another video, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, which is the next Shadow Owen video, which is about poking the shadow, which I think a lot of us, particularly me, I poke people's shadows without meaning to, and then the sort of the feedback loop that comes from that is kind of indicative of this behavior, this behavior that gets kind of hateful. Like, I mean, I've had my work derided. I've had people sit around in groups and bitch and slag me off and call me names because of one article, because of one video, because of one piece of poetry. And I've had things, people say like, how dare you say you follow the Morrigan, you're not Irish. How dare you follow the Morrigan, you're this. I've had people tell me that my accent is fake, and I'm like, 1,000 videos, over 1,000 videos committed to that one accent. That is commitment of a fake accent. What good does that do to anybody, accusing somebody of that? Like, really? Like, come on. But the point is that it happens to all of us. It's not just newbies, and it's just learning a response, learning where you're okay and where you're not. And I understand the reactions of a few people, like when they're new and everything's exciting, to a pathway, and they're reading the books for the first time and they're coming home, and that sense of excitement is palpable and it's wonderful and everything is shiny and interesting, and all these books and all this information, and I've not done any of this, and it's to discover. And I think that's something that we all need to get back to, but that's a side thought. And then when somebody comes and rains on your parade for whatever fucking reason, I understand that drop, that emotional drop that occurs. Like, I also understand when you really care about somebody's opinion and you really look up to somebody and they kind of drop an anvil on your head and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I felt that a few times recently, and I felt that a few times throughout my YouTube journey, I guess, that you just don't want to do it anymore. Like, you're like, is it worth it? And what I've had to teach myself to do, and I remind myself to do, is look for the positive instead. Because you can't keep focusing on the people who want you to go away and shut up and silence you, because then they win. And your voice is important, is something that I have really learnt recently, that it was a lesson with Morrigan most recently, that sometimes those of us who follow a dark goddess, this is obviously specific opinion to my path, but bear with me, sometimes our messages touch people in ways they didn't expect. Poke the shadow. They get angry, they get upset, they get hurt, they lash out right back, and then you're living with that feedback loop of, I was trying to express something that mattered, or I felt this point was important, or I felt that people were being ostracized, I felt people were being silenced, I felt people were being harmed, and I wanted to speak out against this particular method, and I wanted to bring forth a humanity rather than just a paganism. There should be an underlying humanity within things, and I'm getting a whole load of hate because of it, and I don't really understand where it's coming from. And I think the problem is that, like Christina said, often we are mirrors, and when people react in certain ways, it's more to do with who they are than in who we are. That's not to say that we are without responsibility, which is another thing that I think is really important with regards to being the witchy change, which is personal responsibility. Everybody has a personal responsibility, regardless of how new or old they are, to consider what they're doing, what they're saying, what they're putting out there. There's a level of respect required on both newbies and oldbies. I don't like the division, personally. I think it's just about who you are rather than who someone else is. I think there is too much of a tendency in all spheres, but especially in the pagan sphere, to be like, put the divisional barriers up. Like, does that help? To say that this person's newbie and this person's oldbie? Just because they're new to YouTube doesn't mean they're new to the craft. Just because they're new to the craft doesn't mean they're not an old soul. There are many, many, many ways to analyze the incredibly complex, evolving, emotional creatures, spiritual creatures that human beings are. And I think the us versus them mentality, I only trust the opinions of this person, or this type of person, or this type of witchcraft, or this type of pagan, isn't helpful. I think there should be a call for positive or proactive change. However, there is a responsibility attached to this. We cannot blanket say, let's all be positive all the time, because I don't agree with that. I want people to be human all the time, and I don't want people to be perma-positive like a band-aid, like it's a fix, because then it kind of shovels all the negative emotions that we may or may not feel, and we need to feel the shadow elements and things, into a bad sphere, and I don't like that. I think there is a goodness in lifting people up. And I've said, and I posted on my Facebook page, I was like, if you're original and creative, I will share the shit out of that. But on the flip side of things I've seen in the pagan community, there is not obligation on the part of one individual, two individuals, a group of individuals, to share anything they don't agree with, or partake in anything they don't agree with, or be half-hearted in something. There is a reason we are passionate about certain things, and when we see certain opinions and viewpoints that resonate and vibe or challenge us and make us think, and sharing the shit out of that is fantastic, because you mean it. And that authenticity is really, really friggin' important. So when people are thinking of coming into YouTube, I tend to be like, okay, just be aware that it can be a really negative place. I don't want to discourage you. I just want you to be aware and prepared for these things that can happen. And people take me saying that as me being like, I don't know, trying to stop them or discourage them. And I'm like, that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm telling you, be passionate about what you're doing, but be ready for the fact that humanity, as it is not going to agree with you all the time. People aren't going to agree with you. You're going to get trolls. You're going to get haters. We all do. And we all do at varying stages within our YouTube journey or online journey or whatever you want to call it. In real life, it happens. And having a backup plan and having a realization that this occurs, because, you know, you watch anybody and you will know that at some point they have had trouble with this. It's an awareness. It's being aware that this kind of thing will happen and will happen again within circles. People are positive and negative, and depending on how they interact with that positive and negativity, whether it's change for the better within ourselves, which is hopefully what spiritual path working is about for most of us, versus kind of taking it out on other people, which is where the problems come from. And really, it's the lost art of debate. I think there is a lost art of debate going on, and live and let live as well. Like, I don't agree with certain paths' way of looking at things, and unless I think it really is something that needs to be addressed, there are points when live and let live applies. Now, in the current atmosphere we're in, standing up for moral, ethical issues and environmental issues and so on is very, very important, and I encourage people to protect the earth and protect people's rights and protect our brothers and sisters that are in need of it. But don't be divisional about it. That's all I guess I can say. I hope that's making sense. I do hope to see positive change as a result of all of this. I encourage people to speak their truth because I think that's highly important. And that's it for this video. Many blessings.